Sorry, as we're noticing that we have some folks on over Zoom who can't hear the video, so we're gonna try to do the screen sharing just one more time for you all. Um,
In this video, I'd like to give you a brief overview of how the federal application process works so you can be better informed when searching and applying for federal jobs. You can start your job search by going to usajobs.gov. USA Jobs is the federal government's main employment website where you will find and apply for jobs, as well as get answers to your questions about federal employment. Once on the site, we recommend that you create an account and complete your profile by providing the requested information so you can customize your job search experience. Completing your profile allows you to save job searches, create and edit your resume, upload supporting documents such as school transcripts, and manage your applications all in one place. Inputting your resume and supporting documents in USA Jobs ahead of time will mean that you are prepared to apply for jobs when you are ready. USA Jobs gives you the option of performing a basic job search by entering keywords and the location where you want to work, or a more advanced search in which you can use several filters such as pay, work schedule, department and agency, and others to refine your search and narrow your results to the jobs that best meet your criteria. You can also filter job results by a specific hiring path, including jobs open to students and recent graduates, or open to the public as compared to those open only to federal employees. Your search will lead to results showing any job opportunity announcements, which are federal job postings, that meet your search criteria. Review job opportunity announcements carefully to ensure they describe work that interests you and for which you are eligible and meet the required qualifications. Next, you want to prepare your application in USA Jobs. Your federal application consists of your resume and any supporting documents requested in the job opportunity announcement. Check out the How to Apply and Required Documents sections of the job opportunity announcement to learn the steps you must follow and the supporting documents needed in order for your application to be considered complete. Now keep in mind that if you do not provide a complete application package, you will not move forward in the hiring process. So be sure to follow all instructions in the job opportunity announcement. When you are ready to apply for a specific job, select the Apply button within the job opportunity announcement, and USA Jobs will then lead you through a 5-step process to complete your application. The first 4 steps include selecting your resume, selecting and supporting documents such as transcripts and cover letters, reviewing the package to ensure you are submitting all required documents, and then including personal information, for example, where you learned about the job and other demographic data. The 5th step is to continue the application process with the agency at which you are applying. In other words, your application will be sent from USA Jobs to the agency application system. Once in the agency system, you will complete any agency-required steps, such as a questionnaire or uploading additional documents, and then submit the application. Only at that point is your application for the job considered complete. Once the agency receives your submitted application, you can check in your USA Jobs account to see that the status changes to received. Depending on the agency, you may get an email confirming they received it. If you do not get confirmation, we recommend that you follow up with the agency to ensure they receive the application. Here is what typically happens next. Once the job opportunity announcement closes, the hiring agency will begin the review process to determine if you are eligible and meet the qualifications for the job. Next, the agency may conduct additional assessments to determine which applicants are best qualified for the position. The agency will place applicants into quality categories based on qualifications, and the names of those in the highest category are sent to the hiring official. Depending on its policy, the agency may then conduct interviews. The hiring official will select the best candidate for the job and will make a tentative job offer. Other applicants will be notified that they were not selected. Most individuals selected for federal positions will be required to undergo a basic background investigation. Jobs that require access to sensitive information may require a security clearance that is more extensive than a background investigation. Most often, the background check and clearance process begins after you receive and accept a tentative job offer. When the process is complete, the agency will contact you to agree on a date when you can start to work. For more information, go to the USA Jobs homepage and select the middle tab titled Federal Application Process. You can also visit the USA Jobs Help Center by selecting the Help icon in the upper right-hand corner of the USA Jobs main page. We look forward to seeing your federal application. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, it made it look fun. So this application process that we're going to go through right now intersects very well with USA Jobs. USA Jobs intersects with the resume, and then he basically went ahead and painted a picture of how it's supposed to go. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and bring you through the application process because everybody learns a little differently. He kind of showed you how it works. I'm going to show you kind of a little bit behind the scenes, so to speak. So that being said, next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. It's going to cover the vacancy announcements, the elements of them, how to apply in USA Jobs, which you got a little bit of that, and why you might not get referred for a position, and then some tips overall. And then you already basically watched the USA Jobs tutorial, and I think it's the same one that's built into this. So we'll skip that portion of it. Next slide. See, oftentimes people will go ahead and send me their resume, and oftentimes it's a civilian resume because that's in large what most people, the rest of the world, really uses, so to speak. So the federal resume is very long. I have 26 pages in my resume, and that's after years of experience and things. But the way I like to break it down is in a civilian resume, if you want to showcase that you were a painter, you'd say I painted. You know, you might talk about different things you painted, but that's about it. Everybody knows what painting is. But you have to go change your mindset when it deals with federal applications, because what they want to know is what types of paint you worked with, what type of surfaces you painted, if you can mix the paints, what type of tools you used. Did you use a paint sprayer? Did you use a brush? Did you use some other form or mechanism? Did you prep for taping? Did you go ahead and tape it up? Did you go ahead and border it? And of course, the cleanup too. So I say that because what the federal resume really wants is things broken down and repeated a lot of times. Seems kind of weird, a lot of work, but it might end up with you being interviewed for a particular job. So some of the areas that you want to address are listed right here. You know, area consideration, the key requirements that if you don't meet one of those, then you won't move further in the process. Specialized experience, additional requirements, required documentation, and minimum federal qualification requirements for the federal jobs. We call those quals. Next slide, please. Okay, so sometimes in the announcements that you'll see in USA Jobs, which is good, you can go ahead and shop out there like the presenter was mentioning. You can filter it down to what position that you're looking at, to what area that you're looking at, to any pay band that you're looking at. Sometimes it'll stay in there if something is internal, in other words, internal, for instance, with the Forest Service, or if it's external. If it's external, then folks that aren't in the government can go ahead and apply. And then, of course, the key skills and activities or abilities are required of the position. You have to really look through the resume bluntly and look at keywords, pepper them into, in other words, pepper them into your resume and get them to go ahead and say things in there that, obviously you're qualified to do. But what basically happens is a computer looks at your resume first. And if they don't hit those keywords, those knowledge, skills, and abilities outlined in the position description that the job's being advertised for, then what happens is a human never sees your resume, and your application for a particular job it stops. So you have to really take the time to go ahead and look at what the position is that you are applying for, and you have to match your resume up to that position. It's kind of a backwards type thing. All right, and then of course, obviously make sure that you are qualified for it based on the documents, the background, and so on and so forth. Next slide. I'm moving through these fairly quickly because I'd like to go ahead and give a time for a Q&A at the very end. This is an example of a pretty decent resume. It talks about the statement and the position description that might go ahead and this is what they're looking for. And then a response would be under the sample response right there. So it spells out what they're asking for, and it applies to your background and your expertise. All this stuff will be given to you to include handouts. I have several handouts there that you might find good. Next slide. Okay, so you basically have to have an email account. Now, you're in school right now, so I strongly encourage you not to use your school email account. Use one that you're going to check. And I realize that folks these days don't check their emails. I don't check my email unless it's my government email, but I already got the job, right? The next thing you need to do is create a USA Jobs profile. And in that profile, be as broad as you can be. And then conduct your job search. What are you looking for? Is it just in your area? You want to live closer to your support networks, so you just got to figure out what you're looking for. What I've seen often is folks that will go ahead and look at a job, a position, and then it'll have, locations like throughout the US, and they'll mark all of them. Try to go ahead and do your research on those areas, because oftentimes what happens is your application bogs down the process. We've had people in some of our hiring events that mark everything and accept nothing. You got to tailor your resume, like I mentioned, to that announcement. Apply to it, and then what happens is USA Jobs will go ahead and let you know when your application is going through the wickets. You'll be receiving emails. If you're not checking your emails, or if you've graduated from your school or whatever, you'll no longer have access to those. So it falls into a black hole. Be prepared for an interview. The way most federal jobs are, they're panel interviews. You'll have folks that will say, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself, blah, blah, blah. They'll introduce the panel members, and then they'll divide them into subject areas. So if it's on Teams, you're talking like I am right now on this platform and Zoom. If it's on a phone, then you have your cheat sheets laid out. Be prepared to tell your stories. They're going to ask you about the story about most jobs, federal jobs, have a story of, hey, how you stood up for people and disparate treatment and things like that. So they want to make sure that you're a good person, able to go ahead and have good coping skills and so on and so forth. So, and then of course, hey, tell me about yourself. So that's a one that you're going to have, or they're going to ask you, hey, what are some of the things that you think you can work on? So that's a hard one to answer. So I would write that down, kind of memorize, get acquainted to that, because those are standard job questions. So that falls in line with being prepared for your interview. Next slide. Okay, so here's some reasons why you might not have gotten referred to the position. Talks about the documents, transcripts, areas of consideration, resume lacking details, and career ladder positions. Career ladder positions are ones where you can enter in if there's different pay scales, but the general schedule is a common one that the Forest Service use and DOD, Department of Defense. So you have a GS scale. You can enter in as a 7 and maybe climb up to an 11. So some people go ahead and match in between. The one thing that kicked me out was I was supposed to put my most recent performance appraisal, and I put it in there. It was a couple years old, but I didn't go ahead and put in the notes why I turned in an older performance appraisal. Something like that, even though I qualified for the job and I would have been a viable candidate, kicked me out of the running. So you just have to be super careful, and it would help to go ahead and reach out to somebody that's done federal resumes before. So at least you have that edge of experience with you. Next slide. Okay, this is an example of a personnel action, and it talks about, you know, grade and stuff, because some people will use different personnel actions and use the wrong one, like a temporary promotion or something. I'm not going to bore you with the details here. Next slide. And here's something more to it as well. So they're missing information up there. That's what they're pointing out. Next slide. Okay, and that's that performance appraisal that haunted me. This might not, yeah, this might be, say if it's a little old, fine. And if the employee didn't sign it, dated it wrong, you know, just some discrepancies and things. Those are little admin things that can kind of kick you out. All right, next slide. So here's some resume tips. You really have to look at the qualifications and duties, and what happens if you were to fill out your resume, fill out for the position vacancy. They'll go ahead and ask you in USA Jobs, hey, do you consider, rate yourself, basically, do you consider yourself an expert painter? If you don't put expert and rate yourself at the top, you're not going to be seen by a human. And you can explain that if you get an interview. Hey, I rated myself high because I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be interviewed. However, blah, blah, blah. And just go ahead, and that would give you an opportunity to, you know, save your integrity and to go ahead and explain why you did rate yourself high, what your rationale was behind it. But just, and if you're going through that and you're saying, oh, geez, this is intimidating, maybe it's not the job for you. But I will tell you this, government resumes or government, this application, USA Jobs, and the resumes that they have on there often don't reflect exactly what you do. So go through and, you know, do your research, talk with people and so on and so forth. And they even have oftentimes on USA Jobs points of contact that you can reach out to prior to applying. And it would be in the position description of the job vacancy. So reach out and ask those questions. Hey, you know, they can't tell you to apply for it or not, but they can answer your questions on the actual job that you're applying for. Yeah, so it talks about right in here, make sure you have the required experience, education before you apply. Customize your resume. I can't overstate that enough. You have to go ahead and match your resume to the position description that's being advertised. Otherwise, you can't have a general resume. You can have a general resume that you build in USA Jobs, but you have to tweak it to go ahead and reflect that you've done this particular position that they're talking about. You have the skills and capabilities to go ahead and perform that job. And you have to be redundant and say it in different ways in the different things that you've done throughout your, you know, portfolio. The other thing I would suggest is that you keep your referrals, your references up to date. If you don't keep them up to date, when people get called on the blind, hey, you know, such and such used you as a reference, sometimes people refuse to go ahead and use it because they feel blindsided that you used their name, but you hadn't even talked to them or talked to them in a couple of years. So keep those references fresh and let them know when you're applying for something and ask their permission to use them. Because sometimes if they get a bad reference, they won't move you further in the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so emphasize your strengths. Even if you've done something for a very small period of time, make sure you encapsulate that into your resume. Take credit for what you've done. I retired from the Army, and in the 26 years, I had some different assignments, and I kind of minimalized some of them because they were, just a small picture in the big scheme of things. And come to find out, my wife says, no, go ahead and emphasize this. And I did. I went ahead and emphasized something I was in for a couple of years, and I got the job in the Forest Service coming in. Many people say it's almost impossible to get into federal government with not knowing anybody. I'm an example of somebody that did just that. So don't also, if you volunteered and you didn't necessarily get paid for something, put it down. Your experience is what matters, not necessarily what your job is or was. And don't avoid fancy words. And of course, with the military and with a lot of the folks coming from other federal entities, have a problem with using acronyms. Acronyms don't tell people, so spell it out, explain it in different terms. Be kind of have your thesaurus as your friend. And of course, making sure it's professional in nature and run that spell check and the grammar check, and have another person review your resume. Have more than one person review it. Have you ever had something that you were wanting to get engraved on a plaque or something, and you had probably 2 or 3 people look at it, and then still there's an error on it? That happens. That's human nature. So go ahead, and the more people you have looking at it, the better. Next slide. Okay, so we talked about this. This is what a professional resume should have, and it should have an updated resume or email address. It shouldn't have anything, how you can be funny in your email title. It might come across as unprofessional and not being serious. So just, if you have to, make a new email address and make it professional. Your email addresses for your individual stuff, like don't use your college address, like I mentioned. Your current home phone numbers, and make sure that, hey, because I've in the course of giving this presentation, I've had what I consider 3 spam phone calls, but you can't avoid phone calls when your application is kind of up in the air. So answer those weird calls, clean out your voicemail so when they leave something, there's room on there. That's the type of thing. Work schedule, include your work schedule and the hours that you worked underneath your title. And if it was a federal job, your grade or position. Education, include it. Always have a transcript to support that as well. And again, keep your references current and tailor your work history to what you're applying for. Next slide, please. All right, this is an example of what we're talking about. So you have the your name up there, your professional email address, what you're tailoring the resume to, which is your objective, and then it goes down to your who you work for and the date format that I skipped in the last one, but it's a day or month, day, year, and then if it's to present, it's to present. And that's pretty much how it is. But pretty much needs to go ahead and talk about those KSAs, specialized experience, and the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and how much in each work history, what you did. And then of course, pepper in your stuff from your the position description that's entailed and detailed on your USA jobs. Next slide. All right, so that's what we went ahead and covered. That's basically the steps right there. And hopefully step number 5 is you accepting the job. And I think that's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken, Patrick. Is that correct? Are we okay? Here's some other resources right here. This right here was given to federal employees, myself and an HR specialist a couple of weeks ago. And I encourage you to take this back and watch it again and just get really smart on it. There's people that have federal jobs right now that ask for this tutorial I just gave you today. Because why? Because they might have gotten their job on a different system 20 years ago and they want to find something else. So I left a bunch of, go over this presentation again with yourself, look at that tutorial again, and take those handouts that are referenced in the notes here that you can't see in this tutorial. And it's going to answer a lot of questions and help you out. What questions, if any, do you have?
Yeah. I walked in a minute late. My name's Allie, but I was just wondering what your email address was.
Sure. It's Brian, Bryan. Let me put it in the chat, I think. Mine's an easy one to mess up.
Okay.
All right, so I'll do that right now. And the good thing is the government always has you every couple of years change your email address because they say, okay, we need to say this now. That's my current email address. Feel free to reach out to me. If you need some one-on-one tutorial and assistance, I'm happy to do that. Honestly, the Forest Service right now, just like other federal agencies, the workforce is aging. So, you know, they're coming up on folks' retirements and, you know, we have tons of money right now. I mean, the money that's out there right now, we can fill all our positions. It's just a matter of competing with the private sector because it's no secret the government doesn't go ahead and pay as good as the private sector. However, there's some security in the government than it is in the private sector. We have, we work in general, you know, a certain amount a week. I work 5 days a week. I do some traveling. I have an opportunity to put in for a, not a 401k, but you get the deal. There's benefits associated with that too. The benefits I think are a big deal, and then security of the job. But the money's pretty good. It's just climbing that ladder to get to where it's at. Might take a little time and effort. But there's some people are regional forester, which is in charge of all those forests that I was talking about, the 12 forests. She started out volunteering and she started out on trails and then she climbed all the way up and she's a general equivalent now. So, you know, you have folks that truly entered in and worked their way up all the way. Then you have folks like me that, you know, come in from other backgrounds and stuff and, you know, come into this great team. It's, you know, I'm a recruiter, so you'd expect me to go ahead and talk highly of the place I work, but I jumped away from it, worked a little bit over in the West Utah desert with the Department of Defense, came back after this recruiting opportunity came up, and it's so easy to sell this because why? Because people want to join it. And the fact is a lot of people don't have the credentials to go ahead and come in here and do what they want to do. So sometimes they'll go out, get that experience, get that education and come back. And you'll have employees like myself that left that will come back. It's great. You know, there's so many other opportunities. You have folks that can bring their kids in to work till they're like 1 or 2. It helps with, you know, keeping a job. There's a lot of virtual positions now and telework eligible. So I'm in the office. Telework's not for me, but I'll tell you what, there is a value for others. And it's a definite recruiting incentive too. So, and the other thing I'd like to go ahead and say, and I'll yield the time back to Peter, is make sure that when they offer you a job, wherever that may be, whether it's private sector, the federal sector, or anything, that you ask what incentives are associated with this job. Why? Because they're not just going to give up money. And it costs money to go ahead and move from one place to another, whether you're just in college, whether or not, you're moving a giant household. Things cost money. So don't be afraid if you need help to get to someplace, but always ask for incentives. They can only tell you that there's no incentives. Yes, Julie.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for all the great advice. I have a question for you about how the review of transcripts works with human resources. I had the impression that when they're checking required credits against the OPM series, they look at the titles of the classes. Do they ever go deeper and look at a course description, or what happens if there are questions?
I believe, well, I understand what you're saying. They're supposed to go deeper. I will tell you that our HR folks are overworked and understaffed. They lose folks to other agencies left and right. So mistakes are made sometimes. But what you can do is say, hey, wait a second, why wasn't I? You can go ahead and petition when you weren't selected, or when they said that your transcripts weren't good enough or something to that effect. So it goes back for a relook.
So people would get a notification if their transcripts were not accepted?
Yeah,
Okay,
in a perfect world,
okay.
But yeah, so, and then you have the opportunity to go back and say, hey, this actually does encompass this, because look at the course load, that type of thing. But I wish I had an HR person on here, because there are some specific roadblocks out there with, if somebody takes, one course, it doesn't necessarily count for, a particular requirement. And it's usually an HR person that I give this stuff with. But this, I don't want to be super centric to the Forest Service, because the hope is that you get into a job.
Right. Okay. Sounds like we cross our fingers.
Yeah. But get other people to look at it. And if you have friends in the Forest Service, heck, reach out to me. And then if, I can link you up with somebody a little local or whatever, for somebody in that profession to kind of take a look at it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But the problem right now is folks coming out of school, unless they have a pathways or a resource assistance program internship or something else, oftentimes, they're not going to qualify for it, because they don't have the experience, which is why a lot of the students during their semesters will go ahead and volunteer, do some state or private stuff, and then, hopefully have enough oomph that they can go ahead and take the degree and move out to the workforce in the federal sector. But oftentimes that's not the case.
All right, Brian, with that being said, looks like we're over about like 5-ish minutes, but no worries. Thank you so much for attending and joining us virtually for today's workshop about federal resumes. And we do appreciate you sending us the notes and the application material tips. So for those of you who are here in person, if you would like a copy, please give us your email address, and then we'll be happy to send those to you after today's session.
Super. And I have my contact information in the chat. So thanks for having me, everybody. Best of luck to you. Reach out to me and I'd be happy to help out. Okay.
Well, thank you for taking your time to speak
My
to us.
pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.